Welcome, heathens and witches, to the Horn
and Cauldron
podcast, pub chat edition. We've got bevs.
It's early enough for me to be drinking wine tonight.
This is not beer, even though it is beer colored. This is Jägermeister and seltzer water. I know that sounds insane, but it is.
It's grapefruit flavored seltzer water. If that makes it feel better,
it should only make it more insane. But it's so fucking tasty.
I actually haven't even had
I
any of
cannot stop drinking this absurd concoction that I came up with.
That's delightful.
It's like a nice.
That's so delightful.
It's almost unsweetened iced tea adjacent, dude.
It's somewhere between unsweetened iced tea and a Ricola.
It's like imagine if a Ricola and an Arnold Palmer had a kid.
Yeah,
right, because of the grapefruit.
Yeah,
it's got weird like Arnold Palmer energy. It's very crushable, very quenchable, very delicious.
Yeah, very good.
Not the point. So yeah. I'm John Norgrove. This is Julie Norgrove. This is Pub Chat edition of the Horn and Cauldron, the every other week sidekick partner to the superhero that is the Horn and Cauldron podcast.
Where I don't have to do anything.
Where within we don't have notes. This is off the cuff, and most of the time I am coming up with a topic moments before we decide to record because I'm not prepared, because I'm an unprepared person. However, this time I actually am prepared. And to get into this topic, I kind of want to first set a bit of a scene with regard to like things aligning ever so nicely. So I had been watching TikTok the other day. This was like, I don't know, maybe 3-4 days ago, and one of the guys I follow on TikTok did a thing, right? A talk, whatever the verb for TikTok is. I don't know what the verb for TikTok is. Comment below. Let me know what that is.
It's just a TikTok.
I think it's just TikTok. Yeah. It's like gooses is one of those.
Yeah.
So he did one about determinism v free will, and it was very good. Absolutely love this guy. His content is like earth-shatteringly good, right? But he brought up a lot of interesting points. But he talked about it in from a very specific angle of like scientific inquiry and such, right? And like the science of determinism, which was very interesting, and I was super into it. And then like a day or two later, we were watching a YouTube video, and somebody brought up determinism and free will just as like a side part of the analysis they were making of the thing that they were talking about. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And then another TikTok that I was watching brought up fatalism, or like fate v free will. Like, how do you escape your fate, and do you really have free will? And I was like, listen, okay, I get it. We got to talk about this. So this pub chat is brought to you by the universe telling me, let's talk about fatalism or determinism v free will. So let's start this conversation by defining fatalism, determinism, and free will, just so that we're all sort of on the same page. Hopefully I can do this quickly. So what do you think determinism is?
You know what's awful is I literally watched that TikTok with you, and right now I do not remember.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Yeah. So ELI, babe.
Yeah, it's fine. Determinism's. Well, all of this is going to be, I'm going to like whatever the modern version of Reader's Digest is this for you, because they're like very complicated things. And if I'm wrong or you disagree with me, let me know. Because that's fine. I am always desirous of being corrected about things like this. But so far as I am aware, determinism and fatalism are essentially two sides of the exact same coin. Whereas fatalism is the like mystical practice of like you having a fate, right? Think of like the Norns or the
literally
fates.
Any Greek myth.
Yeah, like you have a determined path by which you are going to be the hero or the villain, or you're going to kick rocks or stub your toe or whatever, right? You have a fate, right? Whether that's woven into this tapestry of reality, a la the Norns in Norse mythology, or like your like red string of fate in like Japanese legend, or the like lifeline fate thing from the Hercules Disney movie. Right? Like, fate is kind of self-explanatory. Yeah. Okay. Determinism is essentially the science boy way of talking about fate. Right? So, determinism is the idea that the universe is ordered insofar as actions take place after some amount of setup. Right? So, like, the example that I have had told to me a million times in my life, because my dad and I have talked about this more times than I care to ever think about, or count, is like, if you were to drop a ball, like if I had like a billiard ball, and I was standing on a planet that I could tell had positive gravity, if I dropped the ball, do I have to watch it hit the ground to know that it's going to hit the ground, right? No, because I know that the rules of everything says this shit's gonna fall down and hit the ground, right? So, like, you put some shit uphill, you push it, it's gonna fall downhill, right? So determinism is that reactions or like consequences follow actions, right? So, like, why do you not like tomatoes? Well, you don't like tomatoes because the specific pattern of taste buds on your tongue mean that tomatoes react a little closely to something that you find repulsive, or because you were forced to eat a real gross spaghetti dinner one time at your aunt's house, or because whatever. There's an infinite number of reasons why things can occur, right? But regardless, stuff occurs because stuff happens, and that stuff happened because previous stuff happened, moving forwards and backwards through what we perceive as linear time with like absolution, right? And so determinism and fatalism both do the same thing. What they mean is that your path is set, right? This is obviously antithetical to the idea of free will, which is that, like, as a system of events or stuff unfold, you have the freedom to do whatever you want. It's sort of like, were you always meant to be the hero in this story? Or is it because the story unfolded in a certain way and you were raised in a certain way, you became the hero of the story, right? Which is fatalism and determinism. Or is it because you chose the path of greatness? You chose to stand up to that knight when he was assaulting that dude with a cart selling cabbage. Or you chose to fight that dragon or rescue that lady in the tower, what with that dragon was being like, she's probably bad news, bro. Maybe don't do that. But you're like, I gotta do it. Or whatever, right? So this is that, like, determinism or fatalism v. free will. I have a lot of bold opinions about this, as I do everything, as you guys know. But so cursorily, right? So before I ask the question, right? Before I pose the question, right? The setup is: are we living fatalistic or deterministic lives, or do we have free will, right? And obviously, or conceptually at least, if determinism or fatalism are correct, then free will isn't necessarily real, right? So, what do you think about that?
So, this is actually a really interesting question because when I was a kid, like real little, I had an aunt who taught me how to read palms.
Sure.
And she always, so there's a lot of different things about palm reading and how to do it and what different things mean. So, this is the way that I learned. If that's different from what you learned or what you have read, good for you. This is
everything's different. Yeah.
This is my thing. So she taught me that the hand that is your like dominant hand, so the hand that you write with, or the hand that you use the most, is the hand that is your fate as you have made it. And the opposite hand, so your non-dominant hand, would be your fate as it was
submissive
when you were
hand?
born. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Your sub hand.
Your sub hand.
So your sub hand is
where you wear one leather glove on that hand? Is it like a gimp thing?
I have never in my life worn a single leather glove.
Oh goodness, no, nor have I.
I don't know.
Maybe Michael Jackson
Are you
impersonator?
Sure?
I don't know.
So for me, that would mean, because I'm left-handed, that my right hand is my fate as it was when I was born, and there is
Fate as written.
Fate as written.
Sure.
And then the left hand, which is my dominant hand, is my fate as I have made it. And that explains the way that your hands are very similar, but also like a little bit different.
Sure.
But I've always subscribed to that idea that there is determinism. There is a fate for each person, but you certainly have your own ways of modifying or changing things. I think for some people, I think if you were to like go to the Oracle and the Oracle is like, you're going to do this thing, then you're going to try really hard not to do that thing. And most of the time probably end up doing that thing, but by accident.
Totally.
Because it's sort of like there in the back of your mind, if nothing else.
Yeah.
But I've always felt that
it's like you're gonna get hit by a truck and you're like, I'm never gonna go by the road ever again, and then like one time something's gonna happen and you have to go by the road, and you're not paying attention because you haven't been practicing the fucking Frogger or whatever.
It's like a Final Destination.
It is 100% what you're talking about is Final Destination.
Yes, Final Destination 2.
It's why all of us don't drive behind logging trucks, and also because we're reasonable people. Like, we live in a place where there is logging, and those trucks are fucking horrifying. I mean, I trust the drivers, like, don't get it twisted, but I don't trust trees and nature.
I don't trust the load.
Yeah.
Not that I don't trust them doing the thing, but yeah. So I've always felt that there is sort of like a basic path that you are sort of walking on, but that you do have your own choice within the path. And can you totally rewrite something to be something that's totally different? I mean, like, yes, but no at the same time, right? So, like, I think that you totally do have free will, but I think that for the most part, the player character experience that this soul is going through on this incarnation in Earth is kind of like got a plan. It's got like a synopsis, like a 2-sentence synopsis for the movie, and then you watch the movie and you're like, okay, based on this 2-sentence synopsis, I would have not expected that these are all the twists and turns happening. But like sometimes that's the way that goes. Yeah. So that's what I think.
Okay, yeah. So that is a fantastic segue to
you're welcome.
To what I probably would guess is the most common solution to the determinism v free will argument or conversation, right? And I think it's big determinism, little free will. Right? So big determinism, big fate, little free will, right? Big determinism, little free will. And by that what I mean is like your path is vaguely set, right? There are like big moments in your life. Think about it like not even just from like a fate and deterministic standpoint, but think about them like cultural moments. Right? Like, most people graduate from high school here in the U.S.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, graduation is a big moment. So, like, if you go to high school, you are, for the most part, fated to graduate. That doesn't mean that you can't, like, get into rock and roll and not graduate, or get a job that's paying good money and not graduate,
but
or drop out for some reason and get a GED later,
or get pushed forward quickly and you graduate faster,
graduate early, right? It's big. Like, okay, so, like, big determinism is when you go to high school, the reaction to that is that you graduate. That doesn't mean that in the small scale there isn't the chaos that can prevent you from graduating, make it occur early, make it occur late. It doesn't mean that you're going to get the big Hollywood graduation where the valedictorian says moving words that make you feel an emotion, and you all get to throw your dumb hats in the sky, and you're all going to do a rock and roll party afterwards, or fucking whatever. Right? The, like, standards are for graduation.
Yeah.
But, like, you're gonna graduate. Big determinism. Big fate. Right? But, like, the small stuff, the day-to-day activity, your teacher being like, guess what? I'm gonna do a pop quiz today. And everybody's like, oh. And one kid's like, I don't want to do that. And you're like, I also don't want to do that. And the teacher's like, you're on my list. Right? So, like, that's, like, small free will. Right? And I would assume that's probably the most common way to sort of resolve that conundrum in the mind. Is that, like, big fate, little free will. And to that end, sometimes when you're talking about determinism from a scientific standpoint, you talk about macroscopic laws of physics as deterministic, right? This is the billiard ball pool cue in a positive gravity planet being dropped. Big determinism, it's going to fall and hit the ground. Small universal free will, there is an incredibly small, like bonkersly small likelihood that shit just shoots straight up into the sky. Or like stops 4 inches from the ground. Or turns into a bird. Or something like that, right? Just like disappears from reality. Yes. The laws of big physics, right? Macroscopic physics say no. But the laws of very, very small, right? Nanoscopic, quantum-scopic, quantum mechanics say like, well, I mean, maybe, dog. Unlikely? Yeah, bananas unlikely. But technically, fuck science. Mm-hmm. Right? So, I've seen this said, or I've seen this sort of explained from like a science standpoint, that like determinism is a standard model physics solution to order and organization in the universe, and free will, quote unquote free will in physics, that would be like uncertainty or like chaos theory or disorder, right? Those are the purview of small scale physics in the form of quantum physics. So big physics deterministic, small physics free will or chaotic. Right? And you even see this, like, not necessarily directly addressing this, but you even see this in the, like, life and history of Albert Einstein, who, through the general relativity and special relativity, basically found order in the universe. Mm-hmm. And from general relativity and special relativity was birthed quantum mechanics, quantum physics, which brings disorder, like brings an analysis of disorder to the universe. And Einstein was very against the idea that the universe had disorder in it. Right? He's an ordered universe person, right? And this is because even the whole determinism versus free will, like, goes even more scientific into the extent of, like, is the universe ordered or chaotic? That's like a real, like, read some books on order versus chaos in, like, physics and quantum mechanics and stuff like that. You're gonna, like, your brain is gonna melt out your ears. It's mind-blowing. I love it. This is, like, my jam, dude. Right? And the fact that this applies both, like, rawly to physics and math and science, and also directly to, like, magic and mysticism and all of that stuff, I love that so much. I'm so here for that. This blending of science and magic, right? This science and esotericism and such like that. But so like because Einstein was so a believer in order in the universe, he basically tried to disprove quantum physics, or at least disprove the inherent chaos in quantum mechanics. Right? I mean, he didn't succeed at that. But, like, that's, that's one of those things. And also, through quantum mechanics, we find, like, weird stuff. Like, conceptually, a wall is a wall, and, like, when you touch it, it's a wall. But quantum mechanics, traditional science is going to tell you that wall is mostly empty, and that, like, you're mostly empty space. So, like, theoretically those things can pass, except for like a bunch of like forces and science and such. But quantum mechanics is like, sometimes though, you're just gonna like quantum tunnel through shit. Sometimes though, two particles are gonna be entangled across a distance that just accept that as being a thing that makes sense. Sometimes though, like energy or matter will simply spontaneously come into space, right? This is quantum vacuum energy. When you get two spheres that are perfect spheres close enough together, you can measure a repulsive force between the two of them as like matter blips in and out of existence at a small enough scale or something like that. I love all of this. It's so mind-bendy for me. I love it, dude. But so like that's the scientific conversation about it, and I think the general sort of woo-woo answer follows that same path macroscopically, right? It big, big fate, small freedom. And I think that that's generally the way that like a lot of people look at that. And for the most part, that's the way that I look at it. But I look at it more of a superposition and less of a big V small thing, right? I look at the idea that like determinism and fate build a path that you walk down. But regardless of what free will you take, like whatever free path and decision you take, all potential versions, all options are done simultaneously through the like multiverse is a terrible term. I kind of low-key hate that term at this point in time, mostly because of Marvel. Thanks, dog. But like it's I believe that like in the like infinite space of like in the like big infinity of reality, like every potential path, the like many worlds theory is that like every decision made splits the world. So that way there are two, like one you say yes and one you say no, and it's like this like infinitely branching chaos thing. I think that is the thing that causes us to like measure quantum mechanics as chaotic, because like from like a quantum standpoint, maybe the difference between yes and no macroscopically is actually like not, it's like sometimes it's the same thing and sometimes it's different things, quantumologically or microscopically or nanoscopically or whatever the heck. And I think that our free will is a function of like the small scale decisions that we make that move our consciousness like a fish swimming down a river into different currents of deterministic reality, right? I think that our consciousness, as like we think of ourselves, like perceptive consciousness, is like sort of like focus. And I think that consciousness in general is something significantly more unfocused and macroscopic. Think vaguely of Carl Jung's like human unconscious, like the great unconsciousness that like Carl Jung and those guys kind of talk about, right? I think about it sort of like that way. Like I think we all have like these greater macroscopic consciousnesses that are sort of catching, like to use birds, like catching thermals, and the way that we catch those thermals is not necessarily that we are choosing to affect determinism, but that we are choosing a different deterministic path, right? Until the waveform collapses, until we perceive, right? Until like now becomes now, an infinite number of possible futures exist, and our free will comes from our ability to slightly guide the boat of consciousness, to pilot the bird of consciousness into different thermals, into different airstreams and such like that. I know I just jumped around like 5 analogies there, but this is like hard to explain like in words. Which there's not a better. I can't explain it in song or something. Jesus, that would be dreadful for everybody present. But you kind of see what I'm saying with that,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Where I think that both answers are right, and like I think the easy way to explain it is macroscopic versus microscopic, because it's easy to see fate as like to see determinism or fate as that big thing. You're gonna be the hero, right? But the path that gets you there is the thing that you choose, right? And I think that's just because, like, from any given starting point, like, let's like talk about the hero's journey. From the starting point of the hero's journey, obviously this person is going to become the hero. Right? Because it's the hero's journey. This is like the nature of structure. So the structure is that they're going to become the hero. Now, can you subvert expectation? and do a hero's journey story, but where the person becomes the villain, but really the villain is the one that's on the side of right, and the hero is the one who's doing the wrong. And even though at the beginning of the story we assume that the hero was a bad guy, come to find out he's like sponsored by the state or whatever. Like, yeah, we've all seen the sort of like hero's journey movies, like in quotes, hero's journey movies, or read those books that subvert expectations, right? And I think that that's obviously possible and definitely still a part of free will, but there's also that, like, you've seen a lot of time travel stuff, media, movies, books, TV shows, where like time tries to assert dominance on an action. So like if you go back in time and you change a thing, right, then like maybe Cyberdyne won't take over in 1984, it'll take over in 1987 or fucking
but it's
whatever.
Still gonna take
but it's
over.
Still gonna take over. Now, can you subvert Cyberdyne long enough to get to a place where like it never takes over? Conceptually, yes, but it's sort of like, because free will is affected in small change, not in big change for the most part, right? I think that like it's little alterations, little steps, and we just recently watched something that involved time travel where when little changes were made, like reality didn't reassert itself, like time didn't reassert itself, but when big changes were made, time did reassert itself, implying that small steps out of phase essentially like recontextualize everything, and like it's only the big steps that get like ripped back into the nominal stream of time. And when you look at this as infinite quantum change, and if you look at magic and free will as affecting the sort of like quantum waveform, and I'm going like full pseudoscience woo-woo here, so just bear with me, right? Insofar as like magicness and consciousness affect the like quantum potential of any series of actions that can be like presented in the like collapsing waveform of perceptive space-time, I think that like a big change is increasingly difficult in an almost square cubed way. And I would argue maybe even asymptotically. Like there may even be changes that are like technically possible, right? If you know how an asymptote works mathematically, right? You're like approaching a number infinitely, and then you can be on the other side of that number, but like that number itself, your answer is infinity, right? And I think that there are potential changes where your answer is approaching infinity with regard to like ergs of power needed to make that change, in quotes, you know, like as an example. But like small changes don't require very much power. So if you think of it as like as like square cubed or like asymptotic or even like a bell curve, right? A little change at the bottom of the bell curve is very easy. That's one extra question right on your test, and all of a sudden you've moved up the bell curve a little bit. But like it's big change for you to get at the top of that bell curve where you're now having to go like you're getting you know, 50% of the answers you got wrong the first time, now you're getting them all right this time, right? And when you think about this just as like a conscious workload, right? If you like, let's say, failed a test and you got to retake the test, right? Are you going to study a little bit and do a little better, or are you going to do a lot of hard work in studying because you realize you should have studied for this the first time, and now you're going to do a big score, right? Now you're going to get a big score, which means that like a small amount of change requires a small amount of work, and a large change requires large amounts of work. This also would apply to, and I think this is where this like sort of, it's all, I like to say everything's one thing, because it's all sort of the same, it's all connected, it's all one thing. Reality is like a single moment collapsing infinitely in all directions. Like when you look at it like change in lifestyle, right? Everybody sets a lot of big goals come Jan 1, dog, right? I'm gonna eat more vegetables, and I'm gonna lose 20 pounds, and I'm gonna do a thing. And like, can you do those things? 100%. We all know somebody who set a goal at the beginning of the year, and come mid-year, right, 6-month mark, they're like, I'm at my goal. I crushed it, whatever, right? But you also have, like, anytime you're on a fad diet, if you've ever done one of those, right? You lose weight and you're getting healthy and you're doing all this stuff, but the pull, time trying to reassert itself, the lifestyle that you had before that has more years of like claws into your consciousness tries to drag you back when you have that pizza party at work and you decide like, I could have like one slice of pizza. I know it's against the diet, but like I could have one slice of pizza. And then you wake up right at closing time at work, like from a daze and a stupor with like 4 empty pizza boxes at your desk. And you're just like, decisions were made, right? Or whatever, right? To be hyperbolic. Whereas if you make little changes to your lifestyle, like, you know, maybe not having that second soda. You know what? I'm gonna have soda and then I'm gonna have a glass of water, right? Or like, you know, I'm gonna have dinner, but I'm gonna make like a smaller portion of dinner. And if I want more, I can take more. And if not, I can have that for lunch tomorrow, like whatever, right? Leftovers. But like, I'm gonna do like a little bit now. I'm just gonna do little steps. And when you do those, the pull of like, well, normally I would demolish this whole pizza. Now it's like, well, I'm gonna have like 3 or 4 slices. And then wait like a little bit, like watch an episode of whatever I'm watching, you know, The Office or whatever the heck, and then like have a few more slices, right? And maybe you have 3 slices and then you like watch The Office or whatever the heck, like an episode of that, and then you decide like, you know what, I'm still hungry, I'm gonna have like 3 more slices. Well, you have those 3 more slices, you watch another episode of The Office, and now all of a sudden it's like, wow, I don't really want any more. You only ate half that fucking pizza, dog. Even though normally you're crushing a whole pizza. So it's that like little change thing that builds up. And I think that this is where like, this is that sort of proof in the pudding for me. That it, like the answer that free will is small and that is small and that fate and determinism are big things is a function of like the ship trying to self-right. You know, like if you've ever like flown an airplane or drove a boat, piloted a boat, whatever you call that, captained a boat, right? Where you turn the wheel and if you let go, I mean, same thing with turning a car, you turn your tires, you let go, they immediately want to turn back, right? And it's because like you already got that momentum. Same thing with like a bike. A bike has self-correcting steering because the axis of rotation is behind the axis of this rotation is behind the axis of this rotation, wheel rotation or whatever, which means that like when you're riding at speed, you don't have to hold the handlebars. The bike's going to drive straight. Mm-hmm. Right? And like, yes, obviously it can hit a rock and like go sideways and just like yeet you into the distance. Right? But for the most part, it's going to follow like the rules. Right? And you make little changes to cause turning. You're not doing like sharp lefts in a bike unless you're one of them fancy BMX boys, which is super cool. But like, I would break every bone in my body, even thinking about it. So like, I think that this is where like determinism v fatalism sort of lies. I think that the answer for change is one of big determinism v small free will, and I think that the explanation, the like greater truth of it, is that determinism and free will are both like equally present in an almost superposition of reason across all decisions that we make and free will, right? Like we are determined by the way that we are raised and like the situations that we're in, but we also have the free will to like put that fucking fork down or like tell that bad person in our life to shut up or like to leave a situation that's toxic or to like eat that extra slice of pizza because like you've been doing good and you fucking deserve it, bro. So like have an extra slice of pizza. You know what I mean?
So how do you think that ties into magic?
Well, I think that directly ties into magic in the shape of a big spell requires more energy. And requires not only more energy to initialize, like the enthopedic energy cost of the spell, the initiation cost of the spell, right? The initial cost is higher. I think that the overall like fitness of the spell is measured in a significantly larger redosing, right? If you're trying to do like a big life spell, big change spell, then you not only have to spend a lot more energy to do it, you have to constantly reinforce it because reality wants to pull it back into shape, right? Back to form. And with time, you will force reality into the place that you want it to be. But it's incredibly difficult to do. And it's a lot of energy. And this is where you see generally big magic is like a coven. Or like when everybody was doing moon magic during the Rona. Or whatever that was. Yeah. Right? Like that kind of stuff. Like big magic requires a lot more, right? It's just like having a servitor is a one-man job, but having a full consciousness egregore walking around, right, requires teams of people to build. To talk about that movie that we've talked about like a million fucking times. Yeah. That movie's
just this like random B horror movie.
It's so good though. It's really so good. On the nose with that stuff. So I think that it's that thing, and I think that you see that, like, I don't know if I talked in a previous pub chat or not about what is it? The Triangle and Zeus. Yes. Zeus and his brothers getting their power through a time loop. Like, that's big magic, dog. You want to transcend into that amount of with that amount of juice. You need like big time loop, right? Huge worship cost, things like that. But if you want to slowly improve, it just requires day-to-day work, small changes, and inevitably you find that transcendence. And like, to put too fine a nail on that head, I think that's sort of the difference between like Odin sacrificing himself to achieve godhood and learn the lesson of the runes and such, like Gautama Siddhartha sitting under a tree and spending day after day meditating to understand his place in the universe with such clarity that he's finally able to transcend into enlightenment and achieve Buddhahood before returning as a bodhisattva to teach us all what he learned or whatever. So I think that, and to that point, right, you often hear it described that Western religions look up and Eastern religions look down. Not like down in a negative way, but they look at the smaller things to learn lessons from the smallest interactions, the smallest moments of time, to most clearly and absolutely perceive nowness, right? Which is like the tiniest moment is right now and only now, whereas Western religions are often like full of are very like big grandeur, right? Like big dramatic sacrificing myself to myself, big dramatic throwing a temper tantrum and flooding the entire world, but having like one dude build a big old boat and keeping two motherfuckers of each thing on it or whatever, right? Western religions very big drama, and Eastern religions very like small focus. Both treat in a similar path, in a similar direction towards a truth that sort of connects all those things. And by that, what I mean, that this like oneness of this is that, like, if you're trying to affect change magically, right? If you're going to cast a spell, if you're going to do a magic, if you're going to read the cards, right? Or cast runes or do whatever like that, I think that, like, we often shoot for the big cosmic change spell, right? We all want the fireball, but sometimes warm hands.
We don't want to lose 40 pounds overnight.
Yeah, right? Yeah. We all want the magic pill. But sometimes that's not reasonable. For obvious reasons, don't lose weight healthily. Talk to a professional, my gods. But, like, don't believe the dude on the TV who's like, well, I did it. That guy's making it up. But you know, it's that slow progress. It's like, how do you grow as a practitioner of like esoteria and like magic and like mysticism and stuff like that? It's like, yeah, I mean, get the outfit and do big ceremonies and all that kind of stuff. Like, if that's your vibe, that's your vibe, right? Like, do that. But you also need to, and we talk about this all the time, like make the mundane magical, right? Like, find the little places where you can do that thing. Make micro meditations of your practice, of your magic, right? Sometimes that micro meditation is every day you're drawing tarot cards. That's it. Well, in the beginning, you're going to need to open up that book. You're going to need to read a thing. You're going to whatever, right? But over time, you know what? You're not really even reading the thing anymore. Like, you're opening up the book to look at, like, the two buzzwords at the top of the page. But, like, that's enough. You know what this means. And with even more time, you get to a place where you're just like, oh, I can just, like, read these cards. Like, I just know what this card means. I don't even know where the book is. I lost it 10 years ago. Or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's where, like, like you always see the like powerful gray wizard, or like ancient witch who's doing all sort of shenanigans magically or whatever. And I think it's because they're doing slow steps, right? And small things. And to that extent, I think that magic is a function of free will, right? If free will is the like consciousness collapsing the waveform, then magic is literally just consciousness collapsing the waveform in a way that you want with intention, right? Because consciousness collapsing the waveform, right, to allow for free will to exist in a deterministic, pseudo-deterministic universe, right, means that intention literally is the force by which you are free. It might not seem that way when you decide to like slam your hand on the table even though your microphone on Zoom is on mute, so like they can't see it because it's like a little bit off camera, and you're like bam, but like they didn't see that shit because it's a tight camera, right? But you're like pissed, but you're holding it in your face, you're just like, yeah, that seems like a great idea, but your hand's like bam, that's the stupidest shit I've ever heard. What's wrong with you, dog? What are you trying to tank this company on purpose right now, right? So like, you can free will is that you're going to do that. Determinism is that you had to have this fucking conversation to begin with, right? And I think that like to that extent, free will intrinsically is magic. I think magic is the specificity of a collapsing waveform. It is the intention used to like control this with absolution, right? And I think that when we become aware of that, instead of having to make the effort of making the mundane magical, you realize that all mundane things are intrinsically magical because you are intrinsically magical, and magic is an intrinsic part of nature. It's all part of the system, right? Magic is the chaos that allows determinism to be infinite. Right? So like you are the mode by which you're the universe observing itself infinitely as a deterministic universe through the chaos that you represent as a thing that gets to move around within the individual determinisms of any given thing. You know what I'm saying? So like that, I think that like the determinism or fatalism v free will conversation to me directly connects magic and science, because they both answer the question, and they both answer the question in the exact same way, which is big determinism, little free will, right? Mm-hmm. So that's sort of my take on this. I don't know I hope that made sense to anybody out there, because I understand that I was just talking for like a very long time about a bunch of real crazy sounding shit.
Yeah.
But it makes sense, right? Kind of, whatever.
It makes enough sense.
It makes sense to me. So, fucking whatever, guys. But yeah, you know what I would like to know is, one, what is your opinion out there, y'all, about determinism or fatalism v free will? Do you believe that the universe is intrinsically deterministic? Do you believe that fate is absolute? Or can you change your fate? To quote A Knight's Tale, can you change your stars? Because a man can change his stars. But it's the best movie ever made of all time. I will fight anybody about that. Don't even come at me, bro. It's a perfect movie in every possible way. Yeah, like, do you believe that you can change your fate, or do you believe that free will is absolute and determinism's just like a bunch of science hokum, which is like a take that I've definitely seen before.
And also, when you use divination, where do you think that information is coming from? Do you think that that's coming from the idea that there is a fate? Or do you think that's coming from your higher self? Have you maybe never really thought about that before?
Yeah. That is its own conversation. Is like tarot cards and runes and all that predictive stuff, is it coming from you as your consciousness is a predictive algorithm? Is it that fate is whispering to the cards? Whether that's like three old ladies whispering into some cards or something like that. Is it you picking up on the collapsing waveform of reality? I think it's the
spirit guides.
I think it's the Hawking's radiation version of time. I think it's temporal Hawking radiation leaking backwards in time. I think information leaks forwards and backwards in time because time is not real, and we just use it to explain the way we perceive stuff. Time's make believe.
But this is a conversation for another.
We're not talking about that right now. I have a lot of opinions about that one also. But yeah, that's actually a really interesting question. Do you think where does divination fall into your argument about determinism and free will, or fatalism and free will?
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about this, or did we just talk to you for 47 minutes or however long this has been recording for, about a thing that you've never thought about, and now that you have thought about it, you're pretty sure that it doesn't matter and is a waste of time to think about? Or did we just blow your minds? And if so, how blown? 1 to 10. How blown is your mind? 3 to 19. How blown is your mind? Make it weird. Gotta be chaos, bro. Be chaos.
No.
But yeah, I don't know. This was a very interesting topic. I really feel like the universe made me think about it more in a week than I have in a long time. And so I decided to form some opinions based on observations about that. Doing a little bit of science and a little bit of magic and meditation on these things. But yeah, what do you guys think about that stuff? Let us know below. Either way, I have been John Norgrove. This has been Julie Norgrove. This has been The Horn
and Cauldron
Podcast Pub Chat Edition, where we talked about and asked the question, what's the answer? Determinism, fatalism, free will? Who done it?
Quantum
shenanigans? Yeah. Was it Mr. Something or Other in the whatchamacallit room with a thingamabob? I don't know. Who knows, right? It's the most vague way I could have possibly phrased that. Yeah. Comment below with all that stuff that we talked to you about. Like this video. Subscribe to the channel. We have a lot of podcast stuff that's available on all the podcast networks, so you can check that stuff out.
If you're on the podcast network, please subscribe.
Yep.
That does help us. Also, leave a review, which also helps us. And if you enjoyed this and would like to hear more, also,
or
subscribe.
Actively participate in these conversations. We have a Patreon, whereupon you can subscribe to the Patreon channel and get access to the Discord, and then listen to me type all of this stuff out as we have weird conversations over there. It's the best part. I love our patrons. You guys are the best. I love the conversations that we have.
Yeah.
So
and
thank
actually,
you
we
guys.
take a lot of our episode ideas from our patrons.
Yeah,
so,
pub chats are often a conversation that came up with the patrons or something to that extent.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you can always join us over there with that. Links are everywhere all the time, whatever the heck. So you'll find those. Everybody knows how to internet at this point in time. I don't need to explain that.
we don't know why we're telling you.
Yeah.
Just subscribe already.
Yeah, just subscribe. You got this. But, yeah, we will catch you guys next time. I don't know. Stay magical, folks.
And don't forget, breathe in self-confidence and breathe out self-doubt.